that's what you're preparing for, but still, I like those little bombs in places where you expect they might be. Like, keep up that sort of predictive work. That's something that'll get you a lot of free picks. Okay, and now we go for the funny. We've got a couple of players down, and so now you throw a clam on the ground, you go and make another power clam, except you realize, oh wait, I don't have this last one, and this one's going to break. So you pick this one up, let the other clams drop, and then pick up the clams again. Meanwhile, your team is fighting. A teammate has gone down, but a teammate manages to absolutely pop off and get like a triple, and they open the basket and they get the lead without you having done anything to it yet. You're all the way back behind mid, but you start, juggling these clams on the way forward. Meanwhile, it's just one of your teammates, okay, maybe two of your teammates that's controlling the basket. You juggle them, and your two teammates manage to get an entire team wipe. And it is on the basis of all of that really good stuff happening that you're able to get these power clams to the basket right as it closes. I want to illustrate to you that while this does end up working out and your team has enough control of the basket right now that you're able to get these power clams in and win the game off of them, this depended on your teammates winning like a 2v4 in mid without you being any help to that fight at all while you were off in the corner making your power clams. Recognize that this is suboptimal, because this player could have potentially stopped this. That player could have potentially stopped this. Like, realize that that guy could have potentially stopped this. 3 players get to your team and have knowledge of where you are because of your power clams before the basket drops and you're able to make this play. This is something that they definitely could have stopped if this had gone a little bit differently. And then you would just feel really silly with 3 clams despawning right next to the enemy basket. Let's take a look at the end screen real quick. Yeah, see this 25 right here on the KA? That's the main reason that worked. Because T was up there pulling off multiple team wipes while you were messing around with your power clams behind him. Having a power clam is not as good as you probably think it is. It's important to have enough clams to be able to open the basket, but you don't have to have the power clam until you get to the basket if you just throw clams at another player and make a power clam on the spot. The advantage of that is that you're not revealed to the enemy team the whole time. Right now, the enemy team knows exactly where you are. And yeah, you can zip around and move fast, but a good player is going to be tracking this anchor icon across their screen the whole time. You have lost your ability to sneak up on anybody because you have this now. You're better off throwing this to another player, like maybe your Explosher or something, whose position is going to be more obvious to the enemy team. Because if you try to make any kind of aggressive play right now, and I think you recognize it, because you're hiding behind cover now, if you step out from behind this cover, they can laser you, they can shoot you. They know exactly where you're going. They can predict that you're about to pop out from behind that corner. If you're going to try and play the jump a power clam strategy, this is the location you're probably hoping for. If you are looking for one of those plays, if that's all you need to get lead, then that's where you're looking for it from. Now, again, I would like to discourage players from exclusively making this their strategy. Just running to the basket with the brush held down and this way spamming for your team to jump to you is not always the right play. In fact, it often isn't. You are putting your team at a 3v4 for a significant amount of time while you're going for that. So that makes it more likely that the other team is going to be able to track your team down, get splats, maybe prevent them from getting clams that they need to make a power clam. If your team doesn't have a power clam yet, absolutely never go for this, because what guarantee do you have that they're going to be able to make one in time? Also, in solo queue, you're relying on players to actually respond to it this way, which doesn't usually happen any lower than S+. Even S+ is usually a crapshoot whether somebody actually spots this and goes for it. Finally, and the real reason that you don't see this very often in competitive play, is that at a relatively high level, what's going to happen is people are going to see this power clam icon that's back here because the player is holding it. And as soon as that starts moving, strong players are keeping tabs on where this is moving on their peripheral vision, on their screen. And when they see that it's changing at this angle, by about right here, they already know that it's super jumping, and they can project pretty well, okay, that's going to land somewhere in this area right here. And so they're going to turn around and they're going to start looking for that. As soon as that goes airborne, you're going to have players from mid already super jumping back. And if somebody is in position to actually spot where this jump is landing, what happens is the power clam probably makes it in. But then both players, the person being jumped to and the power clam holder, get splatted. And now the rest of the rest of your team, they probably don't have mid control. Because remember, you've put them in a 3v4 to go and make this play. So you get your power clam in, 2 of you get splatted, and now it's a 2v4 situation where your team is pushed further back in mid. There's almost no shot that any more clams get put in the basket after a play like this if it's being defended well by, a strong competitive level or X-rank player. As soon as this play goes off, you throw 1 power clam in, and you think, okay, well, we still got a power clam. That's still points. Here's the thing about that. In Clam Blitz, you actually sometimes don't benefit from scoring. That sounds crazy, but hear me out. On the enemy team, or they just run in and score a power clam. I'm going to make the case that the play that they made to score, just to kind of get us thinking about Clam Blitz objective, is actually the wrong play. Here's why. Yes, they scored, but first of all, they score, and all that does is decrease the penalty. So they get a clam in. From here, they should not expect the rest of their team to be able to follow up and get any more points in. Because we're all back here trying to play defense still. And especially since they've gone and tried to score on basket, what could easily happen is this leaves the rest of the team in a 3v4. Or, at a numbers disadvantage. So it's very unlikely, based on this score, that your team is going to be able to get anything more in the basket. So you're not going to score any more points. And what else is this going to do? This is going to give the enemy team a pity clam. Pity clams are more powerful than power clams. A pity clam will give the other team the ability to get a free 20 points as soon as anybody is able to super jump to an open basket. So if they make a push and one of their players goes down, that player respawns, immediately picks up the pity clam, super jumps it into the basket. There's very little counterplay for you to be able to stop that from scoring, unless you're able to get the rest of the team out of there before that happens. So pity clams are really powerful in that respect, and the pity clam doesn't have to reveal the player until they're doing that super jump. You don't have to pick up the pity clam and be carrying it around with you. It's not going to disappear. It's not going to break. So we're giving the enemy team a pity clam. We're not scoring any additional points. Yes, okay, on the next score, we'll have fewer penalty points to get through, but that's not worth a full 20 points that we're giving the other team with the pity clam. We went from plus 23 to plus 13. We gained 10 points off of our penalty while giving them a bonus 20 points off of their score on the next scoring push. So even though that probably distracted maybe one player from the enemy team to get them to run back and stop that, the rest of your team wasn't able to get out of your base because of it. It would have been better probably for that player to come around behind the enemy team and flank them so that this fight that's happening around your base goes better for you. If you're at 100 to 100, you score 1 power clam and nothing else even goes in the basket. What's going to happen is now your team is at a score of 80 with a penalty of 10. So you have this 20-point lead, a lead which is beaten by just barely more than the actual minimum that the other team can possibly score. Okay? If they score just a power clam, okay, sure, they're going to get rounded up to 81, and you're going to win the tiebreaker. But that is the only push that your score beats. And what you've done by making that push is given the other team a pity clam. If the other team just leaves the pity clam sitting there under their basket, they can make a push completely without using that pity clam. You know, make their own power clam in mid, or make it ideally right when they get to the basket. Form it, throw it in, and as soon as the defense splats one player, that player goes back to spawn, can pick up the pity clam, and they can super jump that pity clam in anytime they want to just add another random 20 points to any given push. While you have technically taken the lead, it is not a lead that is very likely to stand, and it is a lead that is threatened more heavily now because you've just given the other team another 20 points of scoring potential on top of whatever they were already carrying. Usually in competitive play, you only say that a push is worthwhile if it gets down to at least 60 or so. At that point, 2 power clams are what it takes to equalize from the other side. And so that's the equivalent of them making a power clam in mid and jumping in the pity clam and scoring that much. And that's about the rough mark where you say, all right, that push was worth it. We had enough follow-up. The real way to play the objective in Clam Blitz is you play to keep the basket open. It doesn't matter how fast you score as long as the basket just doesn't close. So you advance your team along the objective line to the point where you're at the enemy basket and you're enforcing control of that area. And then from here, you change the game to a game of splat zones. Let me explain. In splat zones, remember, there is a hot zone. There is an area around which scoring can take place, and you play to keep the enemy team out of this hot zone. If you can keep the enemy team out of this hot zone while you've got the basket open, it is possible to have one player running back and forth and getting more clams, have their teammates in the meantime throwing in one clam at a time, slowly. It's important to do it slowly so that you're resetting as much of the timer as you can with the resources that you have, and to whittle down the score by maintaining control around the basket for as long as you possibly can. Because what happens a lot of the time in Clam Blitz is everybody gets right up to the basket and just all scores at the same time. And what's going to happen then is you're going to get all of the points that your team currently has on their person to score, but nobody is enforcing this zone. Nobody is stopping the enemy team from getting to the scoring players. And scoring players are looking at the basket. They're not looking around them. They don't have their aim set for the places they're likely to be attacked from. They're very unlikely, if you're just spam throwing clams, to do anything about somebody who's trying to splat you, and so a lot of the time they get splatted before they've dropped their whole payload into the basket. If instead you have one player scoring and the others are protecting them while they score, you're more likely to actually stop the defenders from getting there, maybe even get some more picks. And as this player scores, they reset the basket and give more time for someone else to drop back and get more clams and bring more clams in. And then, once they are out of clams, what are they going to do? Well, probably try and protect the players who are scoring clams. And so now this player who was on bodyguard duty switches to scoring on the basket while this player protects them. And that keeps the basket open for twice as long as if this player and this player have been scoring at the same time, as well as making sure that the scoring push is actually somewhat safe. That extra time that you buy for your players to drop back and get more clams often leads to them being able to score even more. You score more clams on a push like this than you even carried to the basket with you, because you're buying yourself enough time to go back and get more scoring resources and to put more in the basket then. This is the way that Clam Blitz is played at a high level. It's something that you are unlikely to see until you get to much higher levels of X rank, but it's something that even if you don't have teammates that are perfectly cooperating to pull this off, you can still do this yourself a little bit. You, for instance, if you are the only player who has clams to score, can slow down your clam throws and give your teammates time to get more clams and try and keep the basket open. If you are on the basket during a scoring push and you don't have clams, you can either make the executive decision, do we need to defend the clam throwers or do we need to go back and get more clams? And you can play according to this formula to the fullest extent that your teammates will allow you to. Now, that's not to say that if you do see a player who is in the enemy base in a safe position this weighing, that you don't just super jump a power clam into them. That can still be the right play. It depends on what the score is between you and the enemy team and what you think the rest of your team, who you're leaving behind for the super jump, will be able to do to contribute. What might work is to just jump the entire team in with the power clam. As long as the enemy team doesn't score on the temporarily undefended basket, if you get everybody in there and one has a power clam and the rest of them have a bunch of clams, maybe that's the right play. And maybe that makes it a lot more difficult for the enemy team to defend it because they have to super jump back and try and get one of those angles. There are definitely some cases where it pays a lot to pay attention to somebody who's this weighing in a position like this. But at a higher level, for one thing, players are going to be on the lookout for this play. They're going to be checking in this area to see this player coming in. And this player is a lot more likely to get splatted before anybody is able to get super jumps to them. And also, even if they do miss something, players are going to catch the arc of the super jump, and they're going to be there waiting to stop the push and prevent much more than a power clam from going in. So look more often for the kind of play where you're going to be able to slowly take map control across the map, and then once you've got the enemy team bottled up in this area right here, you pop a bunch of specials, one after the other, absolutely bombard them with bombs, take away all the space that they can stand on, probably get some picks in the meantime, and then you have a nice, easy path to the basket so you can start one of these really powerful 0 to KO slow pushes. In an ideal situation, nobody is really carrying a power clam until you actually get close to the basket. That's not how it's going to work in practice a lot of the time, but what you really want to be doing is picking up 9 clams. And once you have 9 clams, and maybe your other teammate has 9 clams, as soon as you get to the basket, all it takes is one player throwing one clam to the other, and you've got a power clam. And that power clam was not revealing you the entire time that you made it here and tried to come over here and fight over this direction and then moved it over here and then got shot at and backed up and then went forward again. All of that time, you being revealed is a huge liability to the team. It makes it a lot more likely that you get picked by somebody who's sharking because they know where you are and you don't know where they are. If instead you just keep the 9 clams and hop up and over to here, one clam thrown from one player to another is all it's going to take. Or even one clam dropped from a splatted player on plat is all it's going to take for you to be able to score. And that entire time you maintain your stealth much, much better. So consider just not even making a power clam until the very end there. And, if you happen to be the player who doesn't have as many clams as your teammate, throw clams at your teammate. And that's a pretty surefire way for you to be able to make one, even in solo queue when they don't know about this strategy of throwing clams to each other. A lot of people say, like, oh, I hate playing Clam Blitz because you need to coordinate with your teammates. At high level, you actually need less coordination than you probably need with a lot of other modes. A Clam Blitz push kind of follows logically as long as you know the basics for how to make it happen. 1, everyone picks up a bunch of single clams but doesn't make a power clam yet. 2, you gain control of the enemy basket. So use specials, fight, whatever you got to do to get that. 3, as soon as you're right next to the enemy basket, you throw clams at the person who has the most so that a power clam is made. And before that power clam really has any time to give the enemy team information, the clam is already in the basket. And from there, you're playing to maintain the clam push. You're playing to keep that timer reset. And what that means often is that you're actually not throwing the clams in as fast as you possibly can. Throwing them in as fast as you possibly can resets maybe half a second on the timer. If you throw one clam, wait for 3 seconds to tick down, then throw another clam, that's buying you and your team more time to get more clams and have an even bigger push. So that's really the way that plays out optimally. And every single step of that process is something that players can communicate wordlessly as long as they have the game knowledge to know that that's how they want to play it. So you get into higher level Clam Blitz lobbies, and they can be very coordinated without even needing so much as a this way. Another important thing that a lot of players don't think about is that you don't want to pick up the pity clam right away. The only time that you do want to pick up the pity clam is if you want extra scoring power right now and the enemy team has just broken your basket and you still have a pity clam down there. If you get a successful defense, the enemy team is out of this position, and you've already got a pity clam as the timer is ticking down on when your basket is going to close. If you pick up this pity clam, now you have a power clam plus another pity clam is going to drop. If you don't pick up that pity clam, you don't get a second one. A second one isn't going to spawn next to the first one or anything like that. You waste that opportunity to get a free pity clam. So depending on the situation, you might want to pick it up. Even then, consider not picking it up, because again, that power clam is going to reveal you for the entire time that you're carrying it. That's a huge combat disadvantage. That's basically going to force you to play like a backliner. Maybe if you're like a junior player and your whole game plan is spam bombs and paint for armor, that's an acceptable situation for you. But for most players, it shouldn't be. And even for a junior player, I hesitate to recommend that sort of playstyle. Really think twice about whether you actually want to make that power clam or whether you want the 9 individual clams. Because there are some other huge advantages that you get from only having individual clams. One of those is that you're able to stall the basket a lot better. Like we said, it's so important at a high level to keep the basket open. If you throw your power clam, yeah, that's a lot of points all at once, but it's all at once. It's not gradually over time. And gradually over time is what will reset the timer on the basket and keep it open for longer. With 9 individual clams, you can, in theory, keep the basket open for an extra, I want to say 27 seconds? Because it resets for 3 seconds every time. That's a huge amount of time for one player to theoretically be able to reset the basket. Realistically, you're probably just going to throw a whole bunch of those in at once. But as you do that, realize you're also scoring more than a power clam does. It's simple math. Power clam scores 20. 9 clams that score 3 points each, that's 27. That's more points. So if you are able to control the basket like it's splat zones, you don't need the fast burst scoring that a power clam gives you. You actually get more out of the individual clams. One last huge advantage of individual clams that matters especially on this map is that you can throw them further than you can throw the power clam. Remember how we were talking about, I was saying you have to be about here to be able to score a power clam on the podium? Well, that's a power clam. Individual clams, you can just stand here, jump, and throw a clam in, and stay on this step a little bit lower. You have more cover, you're throwing from further away, it's harder for them to dislodge you, and you can still throw those individual clams from this defended position. So, hopefully I've convinced you that the individual clams strategy is actually a really good one. One other small thing to think about for optimizing your Clam Blitz play. When clams spawn in pods of 4, so it'll look something like this. If you pick up all 4 of those clams, eventually that pod is going to respawn with 4 new clams. But if you pick up all but one of them, that pod is still technically there because not all of them have been picked up. It's not going to refresh the clams that are around it. You can actually do a little bit to manipulate which pods of clams are active on the map. And if you think about it, you want the pods on your side of the map to be less active because those pods are the ones that the opponents are going to try and use as they're pushing into the basket to get more clams. If the opponents score on you and they come back here and they find 4 clams, that's an extra 12 seconds that they can keep the basket open. But if they come back here and only find 1 clam, that's not worth the time that they spent leaving the basket. It took them more than 3 seconds to come back and get this 1 clam that's only going to get them 3 more seconds on the basket. So what high-level teams will do is they'll actually take 3 clams out of a pod that is near their basket and make sure that the clams don't refresh from there as quickly and that the opponent has less scoring potential around the enemy team's basket. And a reminder that in Clam Blitz, your main goal is to KO on a single push. Your goal is to keep the basket open for as long as possible. Once your push starts to fizzle out, once you're losing players, you're starting to lose map control, the defending players are starting to move in, cut your losses. 1 or 2 more clams, probably not worth it. Instead, back up and try and maintain the map control, because it's the map control that is really going to keep your team in the game. If you're able to at least control something like this, maybe control one of the stacks or the other, or even just have the area past this center pillow painted your color, that's going to slow the other team down a lot more, and you're much more likely to prevent a push at all that way, as opposed to, you get 6 extra points, but then they get a massive push and are able to get their power clam in your basket. Usually those 6 points are worth less than the map control that you're giving up by getting splatted. So make a risk-reward assessment there. The only time I would suicide for a couple of extra clams is probably if that was actually going to make the difference between having lead and not making lead. Also, if you get a super jump opportunity, if you're going to take lead or like KO, can be worth it. If you're not going to do that, and you're probably just going to get splatted as soon as you land, consider maybe popping a special and trying to go in the front door. Maybe your teammate here gets a little frustrated as they spam this way at you and see that you're not going for it, but eventually they might, get the idea to try and push from behind and flank in the same time that you're going in, or maybe something more is able to happen here. If you've got a player who's over here this wing and the enemy team is threatening to score on your basket, then it might be worth it to jump across and score to prevent this score from happening. But if you are maybe under attack and you don't have time, you might actually need to spam this way at your teammate to jump back to you. This is especially true if maybe your team doesn't have a power clam made yet, and you don't have a very easy way to make one before the enemy team is going to have threat on your basket. Sometimes saying, no, we can't, buddy, you've got it this way back to us, is actually the correct play, and sometimes that will convince this player not to be taking this position anymore.